Good day and welcome to the Cannabis Insider. I'm Bob Hoban, and as always, my partner Jeff Friedland is joining us remotely. Jeff, I'd like to talk about what's happening in California and how other markets like Colorado might provide some lessons as it relates to supply, demand, and pricing in the Golden State. What we saw in Colorado over the first couple of years is there was not particularly the most sophisticated actors, and accordingly there was this sort of race to the bottom for pricing, but there was never really any relationship between the pricing and the cost of production of those goods and materials. It was really just competition for the sake of competition, and of course over time, the Colorado marketplace, we put so many square feet of both indoor and quasi-outdoor production online that drove the price down. In Colorado, as a purchaser of wholesale cannabis within the regulated system, you could look anywhere from $700 to $900 per pound in bulk. But that's taken years to get to that point where it's effectively becoming commoditized. In California, right now, we're seeing competition both from the black market or the gray market and otherwise that's driven those prices into a somewhat similar range, and that's alarming to me because we haven't even begun production in the regulated marketplace from the state top-down system yet. What do you see? What lessons can the Californians learn from how the Colorado marketplace has evolved, and what problems do you see with supply, demand, and pricing in the Golden State?
Yeah, you know, I came up with the word supply, demand, and pricing. I use it all the time. I've been using it for the last year, Bob. I remind people that went to college that are in the industry, I ask them if they ever took Economics 101, did they learn about supply, demand, and pricing? Because there's not an insatiable demand for cannabis in the U.S. or globally. And yes, you're absolutely right here in Colorado. In fact, somebody has said to me they thought that every retail store, adult use retail store in Colorado is for sale. And I know at your firm's website, you always have opportunities, to buy grow facilities or retail stores. I'm not sure anybody's doing great. We are dealing with a commodity here in Colorado. There was data put out by an organization earlier this year on the first 6 months of the year, the average wholesale price in Alaska was $4,190 a pound. Colorado first 6 months is $1,280. Now we know where it is because you just told us. And I have said to people that it's questionable who can make money at these levels. I get an email from a retail store here in Colorado, Live Well. They're a major chain. I think they have, Bob, 16, 17 stores. $79 an ounce retail for pretty good marijuana. This is a lot better than, it's not top shelf stuff. It didn't win a cannabis cup in Berkeley or in Amsterdam, but it's a lot better than anything your parents smoked in the 1960s. So the real question is, at a $79 retail, and it could come lower, or what you're saying, $800, $900 a pound wholesale, who's making money? Who can make money? And as I see it, the only way participants in the industry, Bob, can make money is through added value products. Added value products being obviously concentrates, extracts, edibles, and derivatives of those, vape pens, etc., where they can have a higher margin, because otherwise they'll go broke quickly. And the problem is, Bob, is that it's an agricultural commodity, and the commodity, because it's illegal federally, cannot be hedged. That's a problem. You can't buy futures contracts like you can do on soybean or wheat. The other problem is when, if you look at those numbers I just stated regarding Alaska's prices compared to the U.S., we don't have a national market. It's all interstate because the product theoretically has to stay within the state borders. The California problem you're asking about is, before the fires in Northern California, which had a devastating effect on a lot of growers up there, and you and I talked about it on a previous program. Before then, there were estimates that come next summer, that there were going to be 8 to 12 times as much supply as demand, 8 to 12 times. And that's a concern for the industry. Bob, I would have to ask you, California accounts for most of the illegal product throughout most of the United States now. One thing I guess is part of, as California moves, Bob, to adult use and the Cole Memorandum, how does that impact all this excess product in California leaving the state? I mean, that's one consideration here, one issue.
Well, yeah, ultimately, look, we've got every state that has a commercialized marijuana system has a seed to sale, or as they like to call it in California, because they had to do things differently, track and trace. It's track and trace software. It's not seed to sale. The track and trace software is ultimately the state mandated. It will interface with or point of sale systems, POS systems in dispensaries and distribution outlets. And we will finally, when that system is actually implemented from the top down and folks are licensed through a state top down system, we'll be able to account for every gram of cannabis produced within that closed loop system. That will help Californians and the California government get a better idea of how much black or gray market cannabis is being produced, because your point is well taken. There is so much cannabis produced in California, and there historically has been, but where does that product go? And will the majority of that product be integrated into the seed to sale system because those formerly gray or black market operators decided to become legitimate, if you will, and participate in a taxed and regulated economy? Or are those folks going to remain on the black market? Because that is going to have a significant impact, and that is what's having an impact. When I talked just the other day to one of my clients who's the second largest grower in all of California, and he has a lot of material, so the margins are built in based on his production baseline. Yet he can't realize the profits that he's seen as recently as 1 and 2 and 3 years ago, because the black market cannabis is affecting that pricing. Why? Because operators that have dispensaries or retail outlets, they can still, maybe not legally, but without any repercussions, purchase that gray or black market cannabis and put it on their shelves. So once we eliminate that through the implementation and the closed loop track and trace system that is going to be forced on all these ultimate licensees, you're going to see a quantification of what the gray market really looks like. And then I think you'll see a price spike, and then you'll see the price stabilize yet again. How long is that going to take, though? Is that 2 years, 4 years, 6 years? That remains to be seen, Jeff, and that's why you and I are in agreement that for most folks looking at California as the future of cannabis in the United States, our advice or recommendation, perhaps admonishment, is wait and see. Sit on the sidelines until there's some clarity there.
Right. Right. Bob, on that point, I had a call last week from a colleague in India, a wealthy industrialist. He was looking to put $50 million into a grow facility in California. And he asked me what I thought about it. And I essentially told him what we've just been discussing. And I said to him, sit on the sidelines, pick up the pieces in a year or two. You'll be able to buy anything you want out there in California. But Bob, I have a question for you on this, and that is, I talk to a lot of growers in California on, let's say, the illegal side, who are looking at this environment in California. California is a highly regulated state in every industry. It's not friendly to entrepreneurs. Forget about cannabis. It's highly taxed. We're looking at taxes out there about 30%. What happens? What do you see happening? Because I see a lot of these illegal growers not coming in from the cold. They've said to me, Jeff, we've been, operating illegally since we were 13 years old. We can't come in and deal with a highly regulated state of California system where we have to hire compliance officers, people to fill out forms, in-house legal officers, et cetera. How do you think that shakes out? Because I see that a lot of these growers are not going to come in and be part of the official system.
Yeah, no, and that's an ingrained problem in California because you've had successful black market profiteers, gray market we'll call it, profiteers in vast parts of the state of California for years and years and years. And those folks don't want to be regulated. They don't want to be overseen. It's not that they don't want to pay taxes. They just don't want to participate in a regulated system for all of the reasons that it would cramp their style, frankly, and that's what's been conveyed to me multiple times. But what compounds the enforcement problem, because here's what I've been told, people expect less than 1/3 of all operators at the present time in California to make it through the state licensing process. What happens to the other 2/3? And those are people that are participating in the, in theory, commercial marketplace. That doesn't necessarily take into account these pure black or dark gray market producers. And the thing is, these folks are city council members. These folks have brothers, sisters, cousins that are police officers and sheriffs in their local jurisdictions. I'm not saying that they protect them, because there is some cover of the law as it relates to, caregivers in the gray market. But how is law enforcement in California ever going to get their arms around that unless there's clearly defined lanes where the closed loop track and trace system, protects the operators within the system, and that there's some sort of gray or black market that exists outside of that, and they just don't intersect. I'm not suggesting that that's the appropriate way to go, because ultimately the black or gray market system would necessarily push the envelope and engage in illegal behavior of some form or fashion, which is not going to instill confidence in our political leaders that the regulated system works, even though it's a completely different thing. But that's ingrained in society. These folks are tied to local governments, local law enforcement, etc. I don't know how you ever get your arms around that or quash that, absent some sort of show of force, or clearly identifying what that gray market lane looks like. And those are just some of the problems that California is going to face with their newly created regulatory division. Jeff, what's a closing thought on this particular topic?
Let me ask you a closing question, because I know our time is limited. If the Cole Memorandum stays in place, which was put in under the Obama administration, if it's not changed before California implements, if California implements adult use, and there still is 30-40% of California product exiting the state to other states, what do you see justice doing?
Well, I mean, that diversion of marijuana from a closed loop system is one of the hallmarks of the Cole memo. I don't think we're talking about lawfully grown marijuana being diverted outside of the track and trace system. No. Instead, we're talking about black market activity. And while the Cole memo does outline, a robust regulatory structure that will in effect crack down on black market activity, we have seen law enforcement and frankly government officials refuse to make the distinction between commercial regulated operators and black or gray market operators. And that every time a black or gray market operator goes down, somehow, some way, that's a commentary on the closed loop commercial regulated system. While there is some overlap, I'm not so sure that's an appropriate way to evaluate this thing. The fact that the black market or the gray market still exists in some places is not necessarily connected to the fact that a commercial regulated marketplace exists. But I will say this, in states like Colorado, like Washington, like Oregon, we have seen a tremendous downturn in black or gray market activity, certainly what's been known as cartel marijuana activity, because they can't compete with the regulated system. So I think it's a function of economics, more so than law enforcement, that will cure this problem in California. But that's going to take, I think, years for us to see, unfortunately. And this is a problem. And for once, I can actually sympathize with these government regulators, with the difficulty of their job, and frankly, how they're going to become evaluated, because they're going to be evaluated by things that they don't have control over. And if the federal government's sitting back and watching and refusing to make a distinction between gray or black market marijuana and the regulated marketplace, then we're only going to see more road bumps on the horizon in California. With that said, California did hire Eric Holder as a consultant and is prepared to take on the federal government if it comes down their road. So lots of interesting things are going to play out over the next couple of months, couple of years, several years as it relates to California. But I do believe that those things will be resolved and largely resolved as a function of the marketplace versus law enforcement. With that said, Jeff, thanks for your take. As always, sharp, articulate, and smart on these issues. And for us at the Cannabis Insider, thank you for tuning in. And please check out our full library of content available each and every day at cannabisinsider.tv. Until next time, thanks again.
Bye.